Hey, Stuart here, and in this video I want to talk about the plant-based diet. So I'm covering off all the popular diets at the moment. So I've talked about the keto diet in another video, and I've also talked about fasting in another video. So if you're interested in either of those two topics, you haven't listened to those videos yet, you can check that out after you listen to me have a bit of a rant on the plant-based diet. So this is a very popular diet at the moment. You'll see it's plant-based everything because there's been a couple of documentaries come out which have been very sort of pro-vegan, and I think with things like climate change and all these sorts of things being discussed, most people are looking at ways to minimize the amount of meat that they are consuming or we're consuming. All those things are fantastic, and I just want to say that from the outset before I really dig into this, that making the decision to eat plants or eat more plants is a fantastic decision. Further to that, if you want to be vegan, I completely empathize and understand the ethics behind that decision. But what I will say is the important thing to understand with veganism, and basically veganism means that you are not eating any animals or animal products. As I said, perfectly ethical decision to make, a very personal decision, but the most important thing to understand about that is it is an ethics-based decision. I just want to clarify that. The decision to eat more plants, yes, plants are incredibly healthy, but they form part of a very healthy diet or the optimal diet. But what I've struggled with, and this is part of what I want to talk about in terms of some of these documentaries, that are trying to twist the narrative to say that we as people or humans, Homo sapiens, are not designed to eat meat. That's a step further than saying, eating vegan is fantastic, eating vegan is very healthy. Yes, vegan is very healthy for you, but is it the best diet for you? That's what I want to talk about today. And further to that, trying to say that we are somehow herbivores and we are not omnivores is just completely false. I'm not quite sure where you're getting that science from, but it's, you even know that yourself. Anecdotally, there is no way known we are herbivores. I mean, the very reason that we've been able to flourish on this planet is the fact that we are omnivores. We are a species that can adapt to almost any diet. That's that flexibility that our body affords us really has allowed us to thrive, and that's why we're on every single corner of the planet. And in a funny way, there's rats are omnivores and so are cockroaches. So when you look at it like that, you can see that that's why those animals can also be found in every corner of the globe. So that's beyond dispute. I don't want to even go there because it's just complete falsery. But back to my point. So the plant-based diet, is it something that we should do? Is it the optimal diet to have? Definitely eating more plants is what most people need to do. I mean, I'm certainly not advocating that eating a plant-based diet is the wrong way to go at all on any level, but you need to understand the facts, which is the most important thing. So don't give up on the facts. I watched a documentary which was called The Game Changers, and I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix, but if you haven't, I'd suggest you watch it with a cautionary tale about watching it. It is very, very convincing, and effectively it is vegan propaganda, and I mean that in a serious way, because they haven't looked to demonstrate or test the hypotheses of whether eating a purely plant-based diet and omitting meat is the right way to go. They've basically started with an endpoint saying that vegan is awesome. How do we make or prove to the viewer how awesome vegan is? So they've gone and found every single athlete that's a vegan. There's a lot of loose science in there, but what I didn't like about it was this concept that trying to say that humans are not designed to eat meat. We actually do a hell of a lot better on plants, which is just simply not true. And this is the problem with veganism. So essentially your body, whether you choose to be vegetarian, vegan, or if you want to go down the plant-based path, you need to understand that by doing that, or by omitting meat or animal protein, you are going to be void of some of the most essential nutrients that your body requires to function optimally. And this is very hard to get away from because plants can help you to a point, but there are certain things in meat and eating animal protein that you simply cannot get from plants. The best way of looking at it is, if you look at it, your body is basically a cluster of cells. Your entire body is made up of cells. Now, there's only 3 things that every single cell on your body has a receptor site to. So there's a little receptor for D3, which is sunlight. There's a little receptor for T3, which is thyroid. And there's a little receptor for omega-3. So what that means is that every single cell in your body is affected by those 3 things. The 3 threes, they're called T3, D3, and omega-3. Omega-3 is very, very difficult to get from plants. Or anything that contains omega-3 and omega-6 in a plant has the opposite ratio of what you want. So it's high omega-6. Any plant that contains omega-3 has a higher omega-6 ratio, which is critically important to understand. If we've got a receptor site on our body, every single cell in our body for omega-3, it means we were eating a lot of omega-3 rich food, which really comes down to either fish or wild meat. Fish, wild meat have the highest concentration of omega-3. So I would say that if you are going plant-based, you are going to be missing that key nutrient. So that is what I would say is the first and fundamental thing. The other thing that's very difficult, and that was a little bit what the Game Changers documentary was about this concept of getting adequate protein from plants. And this is really the big one. And this is where I found the documentary to be very misleading. So the whole concept of the Game Changers documentary was to prove, in a way, that you can get protein from plants. Yes, you can get protein from plants. Plants do contain protein, but the problem is, to get adequate protein from plants, the amount of calories that you would have to consume through the plant sources that have the highest concentrations of protein in them, you would also be eating huge amounts of carbs and huge amounts of calories. So in that documentary, they really only looked at athletes because they're the only people that can get away with eating huge amounts of calories that you would need to do in order to get the adequate amount of protein from plants. So I'll give you an example. So chickpeas. Chickpeas is the one I always get asked by vegetarian clients. What about chickpeas? Aren't they high in protein? Yes, for a plant, they do contain large components of protein, but in order to get 20 grams of protein, you would be most likely eating 2 cans of chickpeas. So just get your head around that. To get 20 grams of protein, which you would get from maybe 3 whole eggs, you'd be needing to eat 2 cans of chickpeas. But the kicker with that is, yes, okay, you eat the 2 cans of chickpeas, you've ticked your protein requirement off, you've got 20 grams of protein from chickpeas. But the problem is that 2 cans of chickpeas also comes at a massive cost of carbohydrates and calories. So you'd be eating a massive amount of carbs, maybe 70, 80 grams of carbs would be in 2 cans of chickpeas. And that's the problem. So in order to get your protein, you're going to have to eat a lot of carbs if you are going the plant-based route. So that's another thing you have to consider. So okay if you're an athlete, probably not okay if you're sitting in a desk all day. And as I said, you can go down the plant-based path, but if you just eat plants, the odd salad here and there without some strategy behind it, you're not going to be getting enough protein. And you have a protein requirement daily that you need to function optimally. You really need to understand this. Protein is a key macronutrient. You must get it from food. It's not something that you can function optimally without. It basically is involved in every function in the body, whether it's, you name it, detox, growth, bone health, immunity. Everything requires protein as a precursor. So you're going to run into problems long term if you don't do that, if you don't address your protein requirement. The other interesting thing, side note before I wind this video up, because it has gone a little bit longer, there's a study done which is called the protein leverage hypothesis. So what that study found was that it's very, very easy to overeat carbohydrates, isn't it? So you think about, you can almost eat carbohydrates to infinity. It's very hard to fill up on them. Whereas in contrast, it's much harder to overeat protein. Why is that though? It's almost like your body goes, well, I've had enough protein, let's stop eating protein. I mean, you couldn't just eat steak ongoing. You'd have a limit almost as to the amount of steak that you could eat. So why is that? And this study wanted to prove that. Why is it so easy to overeat carbs but not overeat protein? What they found was, and that's why it's called a hypothesis, the hypothesis of that study was that we have an internal sort of regulator for protein. It's a really important component your body's looking to keep a tab on. As in, your body has a requirement for protein every single day. All our bodies do. And what it found is that the reason you overeat carbohydrates is because your body will keep eating until it hits a threshold or a requirement for protein. So it's trying to get the protein from the vegetables or the carbs or the bread, and that's why you can overeat so many carbohydrates. And conversely, it's much more difficult to overeat protein sources like animal protein. So that's another important thing. It's, you know, I have dealt with so many vegetarians and even vegans that are struggling with their weight for this reason, because it becomes a carb dominant diet that's not necessarily plant-based. So it ends up, you know, you wanting to eat things that are very filling, like bread and beans and all these sorts of things that sort of fill you up in the absence of having protein. So I'll stop it there, but hopefully that gives you a little bit more background or a little bit of context around the plant-based diet. I'm not saying that eating plants is bad, but does it have to be binary? You know, can't you have protein as well? Can't you have a high plant-based and high protein diet? You know, does it have to be high plant-based and low protein? To me, I understand the ethics of why you want to be vegan, and I completely sympathise and empathise with that, but your body's your body. Your body's designed to eat meat, and until we can find a solution to that fact, which might mean not eating animal protein, some other form of protein, unfortunately we're stuck with a body that does require, in my opinion, animal protein, but also a high amount of plants. So that gives you my opinion anyway, so hopefully you found that helpful.